So I'm talking to you today about Team Wilder, and Team Wilder is a nationwide initiative being rolled out by the wildlife trusts across the country, and it's about getting more people out and taking action for nature so that we can help to fight the biodiversity and climate crisis. So we know that nature is in trouble and has been in trouble for quite a long time. So you can see from these charts, biodiversity has been declining, and in the State of Nature report from 2019, it reported that the UK was ranked 189th out of 218 countries, which is pretty bad, really. And so something needs to be done about that. And one of those things is that we've got this target of achieving 30% of land and sea in recovery for nature by 2030. So how close are we to achieving this aim of 30%? Well, we've got a map of Herefordshire here, and the red dots are Herefordshire Wildlife Trust's reserves. Go on to the next slide. This is what 30% would look like. Now, obviously, we've not just got Herefordshire Wildlife Trust's reserves. There's reserves owned by the National Trust, the Woodland Trust, privately owned land that's being managed in a way that's sympathetic to wildlife, and protected areas, sites of special scientific interest, and the such. So we are closer than this map suggests, but we're still not at that 30%. When the government was looking at the target of 30%, there was a statistic saying that they thought we were 26% of the way there, we were at 26%, which took account of all of the protected areas across the country. But it didn't take into account the quality of those protected areas. And as I'm sure some of you are aware, some protected areas like sites of special scientific interest aren't necessarily being managed in a way or being sustained in the right level of habitat quality. And so a more recent report said that actually the real figure might be closer to only 3%. So obviously quite a long way from achieving 30%. In the public's eyes, there's a lot of concern about the environment and the climate. So this chart looks from 2010 to 2019. That peak at 2014 was when there were very severe winter storms and flooding. But then you can see since 2018, it's been a steady increase with a big jump more recently. And we know that during the COVID pandemic, concern for nature has been at an all-time high. You can see there in 2019, the Extinction Rebellion protests in London. And so we know that people are really concerned about the environment, and that they care about it as well. But this isn't resulting in more people taking action. In fact, people aren't driven to do things for nature. There's this big gap between what they say and what they actually do, which is called the value action gap. And this can be for a lot of reasons. And we know that for some people, it can be because they don't have the time or the money to take those actions for nature. If you're a single parent working full time and raising 4 children, the chances are you don't have time or spare money to do those things that you might want to do in an ideal world. In other cases, it can be that people lack the confidence or the skills and knowledge to do what they'd like to do. They might feel that actually conservation work is what's done by the experts and it's not for them to do. And so we want to, one, address those barriers, find out what the reasons are that people aren't taking action for something that they say they care about, and then try and help them to overcome those barriers. And hopefully by working with people, we can start to address the issues and reach that 30%. So this is where we introduce the idea of Team Wilder. So like I said, it's a nationwide initiative being rolled out by wildlife trusts across the country. It started in Hampshire, and they've started this about 5 years ago when they realised that in quite a lot of areas in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, they weren't getting the level of input from people that they expected from surveys they'd done, asking people whether they cared about the environment and what their concerns were about the environment and the climate. And so for the last 5 years, they've been piloting a Team Wilder approach. And now we've rolled it out to all of the wildlife trusts to take a collaborative approach for all of our members across the country. And its main aims are to get more people taking action for nature, with the target of reducing the biodiversity and climate crisis. So its key principles are nature connectedness, learning and skills, behaviour change, empowerment and action, and movement building. And we're going to take a look at each of these individually. We hope that by addressing all 5 principles, this will lead to more people taking action. So a great quote from David Attenborough: "No one will protect what they don't care about. No one will care about what they haven't experienced." And I think we can all say that that's probably quite true. When you're out and about in nature, you can't not want to care about it, because you appreciate it and you have an understanding of what it needs to continue to thrive as it is. So nature connectedness is the first principle that we're looking at, and University of Derby has done some amazing studies into nature connectedness. It's not just about spending time in nature. In fact, they found that if you just go for a walk, say in the park, you're just spending time in nature. It doesn't actually have any more of an impact on your well-being than watching a nature-related programme on the TV. So you could stay at home and watch Blue Planet, or you could go and sit in the park around the corner, and the two would have about a similar impact on your well-being. But when you start to actually connect to the nature in that park, that's when it starts to drastically improve your well-being. And you can do something as simple as just taking a moment to appreciate what's there, noticing the different wildlife in the park, noticing the different plants. And they identified these 5 different pathways to nature connectedness: contact, emotion, beauty, meaning, and compassion. And if you want to find out more, they've got a really great free course run by the University of Derby in nature connectedness. The second principle is about learning and skills. So one of the barriers we mentioned to people taking action is that they maybe lack the knowledge, the skills, or the expertise to do what they'd like to do, or to go and take part in volunteering exercises. And we don't want conservation work to become something that is just done by the experts. It's something that everyone can do, and you don't have to be an expert to do it. So this is really about improving everyone's skills so that everyone can take part. One way that we're doing this is to provide online resources. So we've got on our website, we've got a Wilder resources page, and there's everything from tips on how to garden your garden in a wildlife friendly way, how to manage a woodland for wildlife, how to set up a Friends of group that's provided by Parks Community, and some really great information there to get people started on setting up a Friends of group. Like, for example, the Friends of Bartonshire Meadows in the city, which is a really great group. We've also got some of the local groups on there, so Verging on Wild and the Tree Warden Network. And there's loads of other resources on there to get people started. And then there's also practical courses and experts out there who are really willing to share their knowledge with us. So if you came to the December talk, you'll have heard all about the Hidden Herefordshire project. So that's a great project trying to get more people recording the wildlife that they spot. And there's loads of free courses on there to help with people improving their ID skills. Then there's also groups like Herefordshire Meadows and Herefordshire Amphibian and Reptile Team who are experts in their field. And so we want to encourage people, if they want to do a project, they want to get started on something, but they don't know where to start, we'll be able to put them in contact with groups like Herefordshire Meadows who can assist them with anything that they need. The next principle is about behaviour change. And behaviour change is something that's really key to getting more people taking action for nature. Because at the moment, a lot of people are down on this left-hand side of the scale. So they're complying or they're consuming. So compliance might be something like they pick up litter or they don't drop litter when they go out. Consuming might be visiting a local park or a local nature reserve. But we want to get them up to the producing and the shaping so that people are more actively involved in what's around them. And behaviour change can start small. So it might be that someone starts off by cutting the grass fewer times in the summer. They might be taking part in No Mow May, for example. And then the next year they might plant some pollinate-friendly plants in the garden. And then join some neighbours to create wildflower patches on the local verge. And then ultimately they might join the Verging on Wild team and help to create wildflower verges across the whole county. And so that behaviour change didn't happen all at once. It started small and it built up. And for some people, that's the best way for them to get involved. For others, they'd be quite happy getting stuck in right at that last point and just getting their hands dirty. So we've got to recognise that different people come to this from different points, different people have different backgrounds, different levels of experience. And we want to make sure that everyone feels welcome and feels able to get involved. The fourth principle is empowerment and action. So a leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, "We did it ourselves." I just really like that quote because I think it sums up the Team Wilder ethos. Where are my pictures? Oh, here we go. So some examples of empowerment and action. These are some of the local groups that already exist in Herefordshire. And all of these groups are about getting people involved and taking action to improve wildlife. So Friends of the Upper Wye are a citizen science group, Friends of Bartonshire Meadows, looking at the protection of Bartonshire Meadows in Hereford. And we've got Verging on Wild there as well, who I've mentioned a couple of times. And empowerment and action, again, is something that can look very different from different people. So it might be about starting a community group or a citizen science group, but it might just be about reaching out to other people in your street, to your neighbours, or maybe something like starting an eco group at your school. So what Team Wilder wants to do is provide a support network so that people can take those different actions that they feel capable of, and we can all achieve different things through that. Another version of empowerment and action might be taking part in a campaign or supporting another campaign that's being run by a different group, signing a petition, or it could be about starting a campaign. And through the Team Wilder network, you'll have access to a much broader range of people and be able to get your message to a lot wider group. So the Team Wilder aim is to see 1 in 4 people taking action for nature. This is because 25% is a big enough minority to change the view of the majority. And this actually has its truth in scientific research. And what we're looking to do is build a movement. And that's the final principle of the Team Wilder idea. So looking at this graph, we've got innovators and then early adopters. So the innovators are people like our members of staff, our Wildlife Trust members, volunteers, leaders of community groups. And then our early adopters, they might be the people who join the community groups, who maybe come along and try out at some of the volunteering activities. Maybe they start doing some wildlife gardening themselves. That doesn't quite get us to the 25%. And ultimately, we want to reach that 25% because then you've got to movement. And what I'm going to do is hopefully I'm going to be able to share a video with you. So this is a completely non-conservation related video. It's a really good example of how a movement builds. So let me just stop sharing this and we'll go to this one. Okay. Can someone give me a thumbs up if they can see that? Excellent.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not two nuts, 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement.
Right. Hopefully that gave you an idea of what we're aiming to achieve, and I'll come back to presentation. Right. And back to the presentation. So we want to achieve that movement that you saw on the screen there, shown through a rather comical video. But that's the idea, is that once you've got 1 or 2 people who are following your principles and doing what you're aiming to achieve, then you start to get this momentum building, and eventually you get everyone interested in what you're doing and everyone on board with what you're doing. So that's really what Team Wilder is focusing on. We're all a part of Team Wilder. This is just some examples: schools, businesses, community leaders, individuals, campaigners, working on our reserves. Everyone can be a part of this idea of Team Wilder. And I'm just going to talk us through some of the aspects of the Wildlife Trust and how they relate to those different principles. So you can see how the principles fit into different activities and different ideas. So Team Wilder in the Wildlife Trusts. Firstly, we've got our engagement team. And the work the engagement team does meets the principles of nature connectedness, learning and skills, and behaviour change. Everything they do is about getting people more involved in nature. And as people develop those ideas, the idea is that they can take those away from the activities they do with the engagement team and apply them to real life. And that's part of the movement building that we saw in Team Wilder. And then we've got our volunteers. And again, they're the principles that we're looking at here, if it will follow on. There we go. Nature connectedness, learning and skills, and behaviour change again. And we know a lot of our volunteers, the work that they do for nature doesn't stop when they leave our work parties or leave the charity shop. A lot of people do great things in their gardens or are part of other community groups as well. And in fact, our volunteers are part of that, those innovators, that very first group of people who are kind of driving the movement on. Called these Islands of Hope, these are our nature reserves. this was the term used in a webinar that I saw a while ago. The idea being that our reserves are a way that we can showcase what could be done for nature, what we can achieve when we all work together. And it's a great place for people who haven't experienced what nature can be like to go and experience it for themselves. So it's about nature connectedness and learning and skills there as well. And then we've got events, communications and retail. This is one that can be the hardest to see how it fits in, but it's very, very important, because for some people, getting out into a nature reserve, getting their hands mucky isn't actually what they want to do. But our shops can allow us to encourage people to use more eco-friendly products. Our events can be a way for people to learn new skills, and using communications, we can get people to be involved via campaigns, via actions that they can take at home. So it's a way of engaging a different audience who might not fall into that volunteering or engagement audience that we've already focused on. So that's Team Wilder within the Wildlife Trust. And then we're going to look at, oh, I missed one, community groups. Community groups that we already work with. We've got our branch groups, our wonderful city branch, and some of the other local groups we work quite closely with as well. So they're very much a part of Team Wilder and meet most of the principles there of Team Wilder. So then we'll move on to Team Wilder in the wider community. So next few slides, we're just going to look at how Team Wilder can feed into what people do in the community and outside of the Wildlife Trust's work. So on our website, if you've been to our Team Wilder website page, you'll see this wonderful map. And this is our community groups map. So each of these little pins is a different community group. The blue badges are our local branch groups. Hereford one is slightly hidden in amongst all the green badges there. And then each of the TW green badges is a different community group. And these are people who have signed up on the website, and they've told us a little bit about what they do. They've signed up to be a Team Wilder community group. We've got quite a range of groups. These are a few of them. So Alemeley Green group is a local conservation and sustainability group. And we've got a couple that are linked to parish councils, Sustainable Ledbury there, Ross-on-Wye Community Garden, quite a few friends of groups, and the Wellington Local Wildlife Sightings group there. So a community group is just a group of individuals who have the same aim, who are taking action for nature. And it can be that the group itself, its main aim isn't taking action for nature. So for example, the Alemeley Green group are focused on wider sustainability issues as well as what they can do to help nature. And when the groups sign up to be a Team Wilder community group, they get a quarterly newsletter. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We can also provide advice to them and support on projects they're doing. So for example, the Alemeley Green group are looking at managing a pond that's on some common land in the parish. And we went up and visited, had a look at the pond and supported them when they were looking at their management plan for the pond. And we can also connect them with other groups who might be doing the same thing, might be doing different things that they want to do. And so we can help them to link up with others who have the expertise that they need to achieve what they want to achieve. The other thing that we can do is on the website, they can provide contact details. So if we have volunteers who might be interested in joining a local community group, we can put them in contact with them. And so hopefully get more people involved in their activities. And then from March, we're hopefully going to be running at least annual, possibly twice a year, gathering of community groups, which will allow people to share their ideas. And we'll do some case studies, have talks from different people, and allow groups to network so that they can share those ideas and we can work out exactly what's going on across the county. But those are COVID permitting, unfortunately. We've also got individual actions. So we have another map on the website, which is about individual actions and what people are doing at home. This focuses less on people who have land or are farmers and more just on people who are doing things for nature in their own gardens. So as you can see, there's quite a variety of different things going on, and there's lots of people who have told us about what they're doing. Some people it's one or two things, and as you can see, some people it's long lists of things. So I'm sure there's probably more if they think about it. So it's been wonderful to see what everyone gets up to at home, and this is a good way for people to find ideas for what they could do, and also just hear about what others are doing in their local community. So I mentioned that newsletter before. So when someone signs up to Team Wilder, they can sign up to receive a quarterly newsletter. The newsletter has case studies for some of those groups that I mentioned before, as well as some individuals. There's community updates of what's going on in the local areas. We've got a wide range of resources, and that's everything from those ones that I showed you earlier, so setting up friends of groups, resources about different habitats, resources for courses on ID or on first aid, and also quite detailed, hopefully, lists of funding opportunities, which is one of the key things a lot of the groups we've spoken to are concerned about, is where they can get funding and what's available. So we're keeping an up-to-date funding sources page on the website so that groups can easily access that. There's also a help needed section, which lets groups reach out if they need help or need a particular skill set that they don't have. And hopefully some other groups might respond and say that they'll offer their help. So the first one of those went out in November. There'll be another one in February. And after that, we'll keep those going quarterly. What is an action for nature? Actions for nature can start really small. So wildlife friendly gardening is one of the big ones, which for a lot of people is where they can start. So it could be something like building a wildlife pond, or planting pollinator friendly flowers, building bee hotels, building piles of dead wood for hibernation holes, or leaving their grass to grow longer. But the key thing is that we want people to understand why they're doing those things, not just do those things because they've been told it's a good thing to do. So it's not really ideal if someone takes part in No Mow May but doesn't really understand why they're taking part. So it's really about explaining to people why they're doing those things and what they're benefiting, so that they are encouraged to carry those actions on and maybe take them further. Another action can be volunteering. So whether that's for a conservation charity or whether that's with your local community group, and whether that's something that you set up or something that you just take part in. Looking after some land near you. So maybe there's some verges or a small park near you that you think could do with a little bit of wilding and would benefit from some wildflowers. You can get a group together or approach it yourself and maybe look after it in some way. So this is one of the Bishopstone Parish Council have done some wildflower planting on some of the verges around them. So this is the Penpester Triangle. But if you do want to do that, there's a few steps to take. First one, to find out who owns the land or who manages it, ask their permission. They might have specific reasons for managing it in a certain way. They might not, and they might be very happy to have you involved. You can then ask someone who's done something similar. So if you're looking at wildflowers on verges, getting into contact with a group like Verging on Wild, they can support you, and they've got the advice and the expertise to know how to approach that, how to manage things like relationships with local councils, and also go out and look for local support. So ask your neighbours, maybe a local school. There's loads of people out there who want to get involved and they don't have the drive or the confidence to get started. So if you do have that, then go out and find some land and get a group together who can do that. Take part in a citizen science project. I know quite a few of you who are here are taking part in some of the water quality monitoring that groups like Friends of the Upper Wye are doing, but there's loads of citizen science projects out there, and there's other monitoring services like iRecord, which are essential for monitoring species numbers across the country. the more data we have, the better informed decisions can be about habitat management, about species management. So the more data that people are collecting, the more informed decisions are. So locally, like I said, we've got some great groups monitoring the Wye and Lug catchments, but there's also quite a lot of national groups. So Butterfly Conservation do a big butterfly count. And then I've got a list here of a few other ideas. So Hedgehog Street, Discovering Reptiles, which is a project run by Frog Life, Garden Wildlife Health, which looks at fungal infections or diseases that might be affecting garden wildlife, and then the Big Garden Bird Watch, which I'm sure many people take part in. So there's lists of these plus others on our website, and these are all quite varied. So for example, on Hedgehog Street, you can go on and record any sightings of hedgehogs you have, but you can also record whether you've got a hedgehog hole in your garden, and that lets you see who else around you might have hedgehog holes. And then you can link up with them via the website, so you can create a proper hedgehog highway to benefit hedgehogs on their travels. You can join a campaign, and joining a campaign can be any number of things. So you could get out there and protest or join a march, but you might want to start smaller. So you could sign a petition, you could write to your local MP, and a lot of campaigns will provide templates that you can adapt, so you're not having to start from scratch, which can be quite intimidating. Or you might want to take pledge to change certain habitats. So the Take That Action for Insects had a list of different actions that you could take to help insects, and you pledged on there what you were going to do, or maybe something like buying heat-free compost. So yeah, taking action for nature doesn't have to be about getting your hands muddy. It can be about protesting or joining a campaign and getting those changes that we need to regulations, which can then help benefit wildlife. So what's already happening across the county? I've mentioned a couple of times that there's wonderful stuff already going on all across the county, and that's been going on for a long time, way before we came up with this idea of Team Wilder. And we want to celebrate that, and we want to work with the people who are already doing that great work. So I've just got a couple of case studies here I'm going to talk you through. So the first one I've mentioned before, the Alemeley Green group. So they're a voluntary group of locals who all had an interest in sustainability. They were all quite concerned about what they were going to do to combat climate crisis. They were concerned about what the local school children did or didn't do. And so they've come together and they've got some great aims that they're hoping to achieve. And as I said, one of the first projects that they've started on is looking after this pond that they've got in the village and opening it up, making it a much healthier area, but also an area that the locals can go and visit and want to visit and go and walk their dogs or take their children to play. So that's one group. Another group, Bishopstone Parish Council, have a Making Space for Nature initiative. So that started in early 2020, and they've now got 5 areas, one of those being the picture that we saw earlier, which was at the Kenchester Triangle. That's their largest patch, and they've got a number of smaller patches as well. In Hereford City, the cemetery has been looking at what they can do to help nature. So they've got a small group of volunteers who have started to do a variety of different things. They've installed a number of bird boxes, bat boxes, and a tawny owl box. They're going to be creating 2 wildflower areas. Initially, those will be in the older part of the cemetery, and then they're looking at how they can plan for any future planting to make sure that the plants that go in are pollinator friendly. So there's lots of talk of lavender being one of their preferred plants that's going in around the cemetery. And then Wallington Wildlife Sightings, which is based in the village of Wellington. It's a village WhatsApp group which is dedicated to wildlife sightings. So people just put on there when they've seen something of interest, and the different members can help one another with ID, and it will also help them to build a picture of the local wildlife. So that's just 4 small case studies from around the county, and each group is very different with very different aims, a very different audience. So we're not looking at a community group or Team Wilder actions being one particular thing. It's whatever suits the needs of that local community at that time. So how does Team Wilder work? So Team Wilder is very much about partnership working. I've mentioned this once or twice. So we've spoken to groups like Herefordshire Green Network, looked at their great collaboration, spoken to the Woodland Trust and the National Trust. On a more national scale, we know that the RSPB are looking at a very similar initiative, so we're working quite closely with them to make sure that we can work together and not against one another whilst we're rolling out Team Wilder. And so we can use those existing networks to support what we're trying to build here. And we can support existing community groups, whether that's through providing resources, providing knowledge and expertise, helping with funding applications, helping with identifying different funding. There's a whole range of different things that we can do for existing groups, and then helping new community groups to get started. So if there's a group of people who have particular interest, don't know how to get it started, then we can support them to do that, or put them in contact with an existing group who can support them to do that, because we're very aware that we might not have the skills that are needed, but there might be a different group out there in the county who do. We want to create a central hub. So that's what our website is at the moment. We've got the community groups map and the individual actions map on there. We've also got those online resources and the case studies that we're slowly building on. So whenever a group comes to us with questions, we can then use any resources that we provide them with, put them on the website so that if someone else comes to us with the same question, we know where to point them to very easily. It's also providing a way for different groups to link up together and to have those conversations with one another so that they can share their knowledge and expertise. We want to create a network of Wilder champions. So these will be volunteers with the Wildlife Trust, and they'll be provided with training so that they can then support and network within their local communities. And we want them very much to be embedded and based in their local community. Maybe they're already running a community group and they want to support others to set up community groups. But they'll also be able to identify any areas that they think could be worked on. So maybe there's a park that they've identified and they want to help a local community group to manage that park in a more wildlife friendly way. Wilder Champions is kind of the overall picture, but one of our projects called the Ice Age Ponds Project, which many of you may have heard of, is also looking to set up pond champions who have a very similar idea, but focusing primarily on ponds and supporting anyone who wants to manage their ponds in a more wildlife friendly way. We've also spoken about garden champions, who would be a focus primarily on helping people to garden in a more wildlife friendly way. And all of these roles are very adaptive to what's needed in the community at that time. So the garden champions, they might be showcasing wildlife friendly ways of gardening in their own garden, or they might be providing support to people who want to do something but don't know where to get started. They'll be very much dependent on what's needed in each different community that we identify. So what's next? Well, you can sign up to the Team Wilder map or our newsletter, or both. That's on the website, which the link is here, and I'll also pop that in the chat after this so that you can follow that. And then the next thing is really about finding out what's going on in your local area, and either getting stuck in, or if you're already part of something and you'd like to join Team Wilder with that group, sign it up to our community groups or get in touch with us if there's something that you think we can help with or we can work with you on. And we're really happy to hear about it and find out what we can do to support you. So that is Team Wilder.